Game 5 of the first round of the Western Conference playoffs between the Warriors and the Nuggets is here. The Warriors are going to look to close out this series. Connor Letourneau, the San Francisco Chronicle's reporter, you name it, editor. I don't even know what title you have there anymore, but you're covering the Warriors and you're inside that building. You're an insider, sir. You're bright, you're intelligent, you're brilliant. I'm excited to have Connor on to talk about the Warriors. We're going to cover a lot of interesting angles leading into this game. Who's starting? How are they going to do? We'll talk all about that and so much more. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. You can follow Connor Letourneau on Twitter at CON_CHRON, Con_Cron. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at DogSurfRojo. Connor, again, you're as insider as they get. Game 5 is here. What are your thoughts and feelings? Are they going to close this out? Go for it.
Yeah, I really think they're going to close this one out. I think there was a genuine frustration from the Warriors after they lost Game 4. They were actually really dialed in. As Steve Kerr said, they might have been over eager. It wasn't a situation where the Nuggets caught them by surprise or something. It was more the Warriors were so eager to just close them out that they had some bad turnovers and had some silly fouls and things like that. And so I think that they're going to be much more dialed in the right way today. I think they're going to be, more conscientious about avoiding those little mistakes that kind of doomed them in Game 4. And they're going to handle Denver, especially because a lot of things had to go right for Denver to win that game in Game 4. I mean, Bones Highland going off the way he did, a lot of their role guys stepping up, Jokic having probably his best game of the series. I mean, they had a really good game in Game 3, and I didn't think that they could play any better, but even more kind of nuanced things went their way in Game 4. And so I just don't see that happening again. The Warriors are the much better, more deep team, and I think that's going to show out tonight, and they're gonna nip this in the bud.
I'm totally with you. Game 4 was just weird. First things first, man. In your opinion, I haven't really asked or seen anyone ask Steve Kerr this, but what's been really curious to me was the minutes distribution in Game 4, and chief among that was Gary Payton II and Nemanja Bjelica putting in. GP2 had, I think, under 7 minutes. He had 6 minutes 49 seconds. Specifically, Bjelica only had 4 minutes and 50 seconds. I mean, these are meager minutes for two players that were really contributing in this series. I've heard foul trouble maybe being a reason for that. In your opinion, or maybe based on what you've actually heard, why do you think the minutes for those two guys are so low?
I think there's a few factors. I mean, when you have a bunch of foul issues like they did in Game 4, it just throws things off kilter with the rotation. These people are human. And so, everyone talks about Steve when they're talking about the rotation. Mike Brown runs the rotation. Okay. Mike Brown runs the rotation. So we should really be talking about Mike Brown when we're talking about the rotation. Mike Brown has the substitution chart that in his pocket, and he refers to that, and he and Steve will convene and talk about it throughout the game. But it's very possible that all of the fouls and everything kind of just made them forget a little bit about GP2. There were so many moving parts that maybe he kind of got lost in the mix. That happens in an NBA game all the time.
Yeah.
That might have happened. I don't think they were actively trying to limit his minutes. As far as Belly can't defend Jokic at all. He's gotten completely exploited defensively against Jokic, and I think that might have been a factor. He played decently well offensively earlier in the series, but he's really struggled defensively throughout the series against Jokic. And I think the only reason, the only real reason why the Nuggets have given the Warriors any sort of problems is because the Warriors only have one defender to throw out against Jokic, and that's Green. It'd be nice if they had at least one other guy who could at least be capable or competent.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
Kevon
you're right.
Looney, as you mentioned on the podcast yesterday, by the way, yes, I do listen to every podcast.
Woo! Thank you,
Kevon
brother.
Looney, on the pod, as you mentioned on the podcast yesterday, has been a total non-factor in this series. And
Uh-huh.
I don't think that's been talked about enough, because he was so reliable throughout the regular season, and that was such a big reason why they exceeded some people's expectations in the regular season. And he hasn't done anything offensively or defensively, and has been a borderline liability to the point where Steve can't play him.
Right.
And that puts more pressure on Draymond, which isn't ideal because at the end of the day, Draymond is a 6'6" guy trying to defend the MVP front runner who's 6'11". He can't necessarily be playing 48 minutes a game.
Correct.
And that has been problematic. And
No,
so
I'm with you, man. I want to touch on the Looney thing in a second because if you listen to yesterday, you heard me mention one of my Twitter followers, Chip Tingle, suggested, in my opinion, a brilliant idea. But let's go back to the substitutions thing you just brought up a moment ago regarding Mike Brown handling that, and I was aware of it, but it's the Gary Payton II thing is just it's been like a year and a half of this where for some reason like the team, you're like you said, they forget about him. It's just the minutes are never enough. And I never understand why. It's just like they forget. It's really weird. I've never gotten a clear answer as to why Gary Payton II does not consistently get large minutes, given he's almost always having a positive impact. But look, Mike Brown just interviewed for the Sacramento Kings head coaching position, and that did cross my mind. It's like because you mentioned this, and I've heard from other people as well that Mike Brown actually has a much larger role than people realize potentially in regards, especially to the substitution patterns. Do you think like being interviewed for a job in the middle of a playoff series has an impact on your preparation, on your planning, and on your focus in the game, or am I just reading way too much into that?
I think you might be reading too much into that.
All right.
Mike, I know Mike well. At the end of the day, Mike is a pro.
Yeah.
He's been through this rodeo before. This is often when the interviews happen is during the playoffs
Right.
because the teams who have head coaching vacancies didn't make the playoffs. And so, he's interviewed in recent years with Indiana, with the Clippers, with the Knicks, I believe twice with the Knicks.
Wow.
So, he's been through this in recent years. And, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Mike is one of the hardest working coaches in the NBA I've ever seen.
Agreed.
He's famous for his color coded practice reports and his detailed substitution patterns. And like, he really pours over this in a way that almost akin to like a college coach. In terms of hours logged, in terms of the nitty gritty of X's and O's, college coaches log way more hours than NBA coaches. It's just a different type of job. NBA coaches, you could say they log as many hours just because of the travel and those types of demands. But in terms of a schematic standpoint, Brown is almost like a college coach, and I've always
Yeah.
respected that about him.
Same, man. It's and again, he's been coaching for so long. I mean, all those LeBron years in Cleveland. I just hope he looks at Sacramento and realizes, look, this could be a disaster. This is not. You could have the most brilliant head coach on the planet being a part of that team, and when you're putting together rosters that make no sense, it's just what can a coach do?
I would be surprised if Mike went to Sacramento.
Same.
Even if he got offered, I would not be surprised if he turned it down. I haven't talked to him about that opening, but I've talked to him about other openings in the past, and the thing he's always said is it's not like I would just take any NBA head coaching job. Like it has to be the right fit. It has to be a situation where I feel like confident I can succeed. And I think he's a smart enough guy to look at the situation in Sacramento and see they've had 12 coaches in the past 15 years. They fired some really good coaches like Michael Malone and some other guys. And
George Karl,
it's
among many.
not, there's no guarantee that Mike could go in there and suddenly like carve out the rest of his career there. And I think he's aware of that. And he also knows that he's been fired as an NBA head coach 3 times. That I make the argument that he's the best coach to ever be fired in the NBA 3 times. If you look at his overall record, the things that he accomplished, I do believe he deserves a 4th shot. But if that 4th shot was Sacramento and he lasted like 1 or 2 years, he's probably not getting another shot. So he's aware of that.
I'm with you, man. And In just a moment, we're going to talk about Kevon Looney because, again, someone on social media made a brilliant suggestion. I talked about it on yesterday's show. But first, look, summer's coming. You got to wear those shades to protect the eyeballs. And Shady Rays is a great way to do that. They're an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for just a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you're not going to find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. And folks, when it's summertime, you're going to the lake, you're going to the beach, shades sink. They disappear if they fall into the water. Well, with Shady Rays, they include a loss and protection program on every pair. That means they're going to send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happened. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays exclusively for our listeners. Head to shadyrays.com and use the code Locked On to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That code again is Locked On for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses, backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. And so is Connor Letourneau on Twitter. He's free and available at CON_CHRON, Con_Cron, and follow me on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. Connor, a Twitter user by the name of Chip Tingle, an honorary fellow that him and I have some fun back and forths on Twitter again. He made, in my opinion, a brilliant suggestion. And look, and this leads to a bigger question as well, or a bigger issue, and that's the Warriors starting five. You wrote a great column or article, I'm sorry, a couple days ago, where you basically highlighted the fact that it's time for Stephen Curry to be starting again. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that, but I don't want Jordan Poole coming off the bench. And something tells me that's what's going to happen. We don't know, hasn't announced this at all, but I really think personally, and I feel really strongly about this, you go with that death lineup, whatever we would call this, a death pool lineup, where you have your splash party, you have Draymond Green and Wiggins as your fifth starter, and you bring Looney off the bench. And I feel like by bringing Looney off the bench, you could actually utilize him in a way that is effective. And what I mean by that is that the Nuggets don't just have Nikola Jokic as a big center that is causing the Warriors problems. They also have DeMarcus Cousins, who's giving them effective minutes, and he's bulldozing his way inside. And I really think Kevon Looney would serve a much better role covering Cousins off the bench. What do you think about that idea, and what are you hearing or feeling about the starting five for tonight's game?
I agree with you. I completely agree with you. As I said in that, we can call it a column. It was effectively a column.
Okay.
I'm not a columnist, so we call them analysis pieces, but it was a column. But in that piece, I outlined why I felt like they need to go all in on the death lineup, and there's several reasons. It's kind of multifaceted, but the bottom line is I fully expect Steph Curry to start tonight. He played 37 minutes in the last game. You know, there's no restrictions on him at this point. Steve Kerr has said he's going to return to the starting lineup whenever he's ready, and all indications are he's 100% ready. So you'd actually be doing him a disservice by holding him out of the starting lineup going forward. So he will start tonight. I fully expect him to start tonight. But as you alluded to, the big question is, what does that mean for the rest of the starting lineup? I agree with you. I do think that Steve is going to go safe and just bring Jordan off the bench and start Kevon. He has gone out of his way multiple times in press conferences and interviews lately to talk about the possibility of Poole coming off the bench. I just don't think that would be as actively on his mind if he wasn't seriously considering that. So I expect them to kind of do the normal lineup tonight of Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Draymond, and Looney. I I personally agree with you, though. I think they should go all in on the 3-guard lineup for a few reasons. First of all, one of the big reasons is what we had talked about earlier about Kevon. Kevon is struggling. He's not the player he was in the regular season. There's no guarantees that he's going to suddenly get that back next round. And
Right.
the truth is, I know that the 3-guard lineup hasn't been elite the past 2 games, but it's still their best overall lineup by far, both from a number standpoint and from the eye test. And this is a lineup that should be your starting unit, not just to close out Denver, but really going forward. I mean, you look at who they're going to face in the next round, either Memphis or Minnesota, probably going to be Memphis. They match up much better with both of those teams than the Kevon Looney lineups would. And I think that it'd be kind of nice for them to get this experience in a high stakes game with that lineup to start. And then you can go forward with it and just, ride or die with it, rather than starting a series, an important playoff series, not sure what that group can do to start a game. And, the big thing Steve keeps saying is, but I want to close the second quarters with these guys. I want to close games with these guys. Cool. Do it all.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they've only they haven't been playing that many minutes together. So it's like, get them a few minutes to start the game, then get them out there in the critical times to close quarters. You can do that. And it's also going to ensure, that Draymond is in that 5 position the majority of the game, which I think he needs to be. I mean, we're seeing right now that when it comes to the playoffs, he's really their best 5. I mean, that's not really news. That's been the case for years, but it's been readily apparent, especially given how Kevon has played and the lack of depth at center. Belly is good in a lot of ways, but he's a liability defensively against good centers. I can't hear you.
No, my bad, man. That's me being an idiot and hitting the mute button. Let me try that again. Andre Iguodala. I cannot believe I just did that. Andre Iguodala again. He's been contributing nothing. He had a nothing burger in Game 4, and in Game 4 he contributed nothing. Games 1 and 3 he was actually solid. Game 3 we saw that monster dunk. In Game 1 he contributed great minutes, but Game 4 it was a nothing burger. He had 0 points, 0 assists, 1 rebound. And the Nuggets did not respect him at all as a shooter. I mean, that's a huge reason why I like Bjelica out there, because you're right. Defensively, he is a liability. He's been a liability all season, but offensively, he spaces the floor because teams have to respect his 3-point shooting. There's no respect with Iggy. I mean, you saw that, right? They just let him shoot, and it paid off. That strategy totally paid off. So, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on Iguodala? Like, how do you see him fitting moving forward with this Warriors team?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It's the thing about Andre is like when they signed him, the entire thought process was just help us in the playoffs. Just help us in the playoffs. We know you're 38, and we know this is your last season probably in the NBA. We know you deal with a bunch of minor injuries, and if you have to miss a bunch of time in the regular season, whatever. What matters is the playoffs. Be ready to go. Now we're here in the playoffs, and the same issues are still lingering. Like he had that neck issue. He doesn't look totally right physically. I know he had that nice dunk the other day, but like he's just been a non-factor for extended stretches. And I honestly wonder if he even deserves a spot in the regular playoff rotation right now. Like it almost feels like he has one just because of the equity he's built up in the organization and with Steve. But when it comes to the playoffs, you you can't be making decisions off what people used to be. You know,
Correct.
you can't be making decisions off of the fact that a guy was really helpful for you in the past. It's like, it's all about where they are right now. And I personally feel like GP2 is much more helpful consistently
Agreed.
at this level right now. And I would like to see some of those minutes. I'm not saying totally knock him out of the rotation, but I would like to see GP2 get more of Andre's minutes and have Andre be limited to, you know, maybe like 10 to 12 minutes in a game tops.
Agreed. And look, the two things I feel like Kerr needs to focus on with Iguodala is one, if you're going to play him, surround him with offensive weapons because he's such a liability offensively. I mean, I know he was stuck around in practice yesterday and was working on his shot, putting in extra minutes, but offensively, the Nuggets have zero respect for him. I mean, he just stands out there and all they do is back off and double Steph or, you know, wait for him to penetrate because that's all he can really do. And so I don't want him out there with other defensive type players because you're just really clogging the paint at that point and you're letting them double the shooters. And secondly, I don't want him guarding the centers anymore. That was a ridiculous matchup where you saw him defending Cousins and just getting eaten alive. You saw him guarding Jokic getting eaten alive.
He's not the defender he used to be because, you know, the lateral quickness isn't there. I mean, he is really savvy and really smart, but that can only go so far when you don't have the physical tools to back it up. And his skills really are waning on both sides of the ball. I mean, you remember last year in Miami, he was bad. Like he was bad, like really bad. And he had a significant role in that team because they kind of struck out in free agency and they needed to rely on him along the wing, and he just couldn't answer the call at all. And he didn't deal with the health issues that he's been dealing with this year. So I mean, the writing's been on the wall that he's just, you know, well past his prime at this point. And, you know, I'm not saying he should be Udonis Haslem and just be a guy who's solely on the bench as like an extra assistant coach, but that should kind of pseudo be his role. Like, you know, play some spot minutes here or there, but like you're mainly here to coach up the young guys and to be a veteran presence. And it's also because you have GP2, who I know you're incredibly high on, and I am too. GP2 is an elite defender. GP2,
Agreed.
if he played more minutes, would be an all defensive team guard. I mean, he's that good defensively. And he's shown in this series that he can knock down big shots in high stakes games. You know, his shooting percentages are through the roof. He plays within himself offensively. He knows how to play. And I agree with you. Why isn't he playing more? And you know, yes, he's 6'3", but he plays like he's 6'9". So
He does. It's crazy. Like his athleticism is ridiculous. And I really do think Iguodala has a role moving forward. I just don't think this series is it. I think against the Memphis, he could contribute because the Warriors, I think, are going to need those longer, more athletic types on the defensive end. And ultimately, I just think Iggy's not eating his Built Bars. I think look, man, these things are full of protein. They're yummy. They're covered in 100% chocolate. Iggy, gobble down those Built Bars, brother. That'll make you feel good. They even got the puffs. These are protein-infused marshmallow bars, but regardless, all the flavors, whether you're picking from mint brownie, coconut almond, cookies and cream, these are yummy protein bars, and they're good for you. Most Built Bars on average only have 130 calories versus 240 for a candy bar, only 4 grams of sugar versus on average 30 for a candy bar, and sugar is toxic for your body, folks. And they're packed with 17 grams of protein. That's where Iggy could really use that extra punch, whereas your typical candy bar is not laden with protein. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. You can follow Connor Letourneau on Twitter at @con_cron. Dude, I don't know what the stat is. I was trying to find it. It's not an easy stat to pull up, but I was trying to figure out how many minutes Steph, Klay, and Poole played together in Game 4, because it really seemed abysmal in terms of the number of minutes they were on the floor together, given how effective they are offensively. I don't know if you have that data, but I'm more curious as well to ask you, why do you think Kerr is not utilizing these three together more? I understand you got to stagger the minutes and give each other rest, but to wait until late second quarter to introduce them, I feel like is a disservice to the team as a whole. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the requirements of being an NBA beat writer these days is to have at least a working knowledge of how to use NBA.com's advanced stats platform.
Yes.
So I don't have it in front of me, but I could definitely show you how to find that information. All that, literally everything you would ever want to know is on NBAstats.com, NBA.com stats. It's insane. But to answer your question, I think we almost shouldn't read too much into the rotation in Game 4. There were so many weird things going on with the fouls and different things like that I think that it got messed up. And Steve would admit to that and cop to that. I don't think he was super happy with certain things that happened in that game. But I agree that they need to get those guys together more. I think starting the death lineup would help that. And, Poole has shown that Poole is at his best when he's with those guys. And I think, maybe part of the reason why he wasn't as effective in Game 4 is because he had less minutes with those guys. I would have to take a deeper look at the rotation, but he obviously was not himself in Game 4. And I think a lot of people were freaking out about that. I think that we have to keep in mind that this guy's 22 years old. He came out of absolutely nowhere. He is in his first playoffs ever. There's going to be a learning curve. And even if, a steady drumbeat of great games kind of lulls you into thinking he's further along than he is, the truth is he is a 22-year-old who was in the G League last season, and he's going to have the occasional bad game. I think I'm going to chalk that up to just a bad game. They defended him. Denver defended him differently. He had a hard time adjusting. I think he's going to look at the film and adjust. I expect him to have a good game tonight.
It's funny. I actually went to NBA.com/stats, and just from in 2 minutes of research, I found that at least Curry, Thompson, Green, Wiggins, and Poole through 4 games of the series, they played a total of 32 minutes together, which averages out to 8 minutes a game. So there you go. They have a plus minus of 26 together. I want to see that number bigger. I really think if you want to blow this team out, and look, as I'm sure closing a team out, especially when you're up 3-0, but that closeout game, every ex-player and former player tells you that's the hardest game to play, is to actually close out a team. And Denver did not want to get swept. You saw the fight in there. The officiating's been just sketchy. Dude, tell me about officiating, man, because yesterday, the last 2 days, I've been talking a lot about it. George Karl, who I had on Monday's show, his emotions run deep with the Nuggets. He's much more connected to that fan base and that organization. And even he came out at the start of Game 5, and he tweeted out that the refs want there to be a 5th game, or that the league wants there to be a 5th game. What are your thoughts on officials? Like, is a lot of this, in your opinion, just conspiracy? And if not, what are your feelings about NBA officials in terms of them maybe getting messages from the league offices like, let's make this one close. Let's try to stretch this to 5 games. What are your thoughts on all that?
I completely understand the thought process. I've looked at the numbers before. The longer these series go, the better it is for the league in a major way. They make so much money off of each game, both in the TV and also just the at the gate revenue. The truth is, I think if you gave a lie detector test to Joe Lacob, he would want it to go at least 5 or 6, or at least 5 games, so they could have one more game at home. Because they're going to be making a lot of money tonight. But But the bottom
I've read
line is,
8 million. I've heard 8 million is what they're going to pull in for tonight's game. It's a
yeah,
total.
that's not an insignificant amount of money, even when you're
No, it's
talking
not.
about a team that's worth billions. And I think that I think I don't know if there is I've never heard of there being an actual directive about that to officials, but you've seen it for years. The whistles are always much tighter in the playoffs. I think it's just because the stakes are higher.
Mhm.
They're calling a lot more ticky-tack things, partly because these referees are human beings and they would rather overcall a game than undercall a game, especially at that level. So they're kind of covering their asses a little bit. Um, I thought in game 4 there were ticky-tack calls for both teams. You know, we talk a lot about the Warriors. I believe the Nuggets had more fouls in that game than the Warriors. Um, so
Interesting. Not the
so
first quarter, first half though, but
there
I
were
can
a
see that
lot of
overall.
fouls called on both teams.
That's fair. Yeah, that is fair. I mean, look, Tim Donaghy did happen. And during the offseason, I really want to dedicate some shows to just the potential because David Stern did a brilliant job of sweeping that whole thing under the rug when it happened. But there's so much sketchiness surrounding that story. There's actually, I think, a documentary coming out soon about it as well. And it's just crazy. It's just, I don't think it's so much conspiracy when you look at the money and money corrupts. But whatever, man. That's for a future show. Give us your thoughts as we wrap things up today on tonight's game. What do you think is going to happen? You mentioned that you think Game 5 is going to go to the Warriors. Will it be a blowout? Do you think it's going to be closer than people anticipate? The line is 9 in favor of the Warriors, which is a huge spread. How do you think these things are going to play out on a more intricate, detailed level?
I think the Warriors are going to win convincingly. It is a big line. It's bigger than I expected. But I would take the over. I think the Warriors are going to beat them by double digits. I'm not sure I'd say a blowout, because to me a blowout is like north of 16, 17 points.
Okay.
I see them beating them by like 10 to 12, 10 to 13 points. But being in the driver's seat the whole game. They're at home. Both games at home previously in the series, they've won in commanding fashion. I think that they know exactly what Denver did to beat them in game 4, and they also know exactly what they did to beat themselves, because a lot of that was them beating themselves. And they're gonna come out focused tonight and come out and get to a big lead early, hopefully with that death lineup starting. We'll see. I really don't see that happening. I think Steve is sometimes overly cautious in these situations, and
Agreed.
I think in his mind he wants to like pull that rabbit out of his hat, like when it really matters later in the playoffs. I disagree with the logic. I don't even think it is a rabbit in your hat at this point. I mean, people know what it is. People
Mm-hmm.
have seen it now. Like,
Yep.
does it really matter? Like, how many? Is it really like this thing that's going to catch people off guard? Just like at the end of quarters, it's not. Like, so just trust the fact that it's your best lineup, and trust the fact that no one can stop it because they're so lethal, and go for it. That's my thought process. I think there's a little bit sometimes too much gamesmanship in the playoffs. It's like, well, if they do this and this is this, it's like, no, dude, they're the best players you have. Play them. It's not that complicated, you know.
I'm 100% with you, and again, the fact that this death pool lineup, whatever you want to call it, they played 32 minutes together in the entire series. That's 8 minutes a game. I think it wouldn't hurt them to have those 5 on the court together for a little more than 8 minutes a game. Do you have time for just another question or two? I want to shift gears and go across the NBA landscape. Do you have a moment, or do you have to run?
Sure.
What do you think about Kevin Durant calling himself a god? And I bring up Kevin Durant just because, look, this is a former Golden State Warrior. He chose the left for reasons, we could all speculate and probably speculate fairly accurately, but it is still speculation because until Kevin Durant flat out says it himself, we're not going to really know the why of him leaving for a clearly a more mediocre organization and team. But then yesterday he comes out and like starts picking fights again. He's going back to his old like immature self with Twitter. What are your thoughts on Kevin Durant, man? Like, did he make a huge mistake? And just give me your thoughts, please.
First of all, that's not the old Kevin Durant. That's just Kevin Durant. I mean, that Kevin Durant never stopped. I mean, he's always been like that. I've never seen a season where he just got off Twitter or something.
That's fair.
That's always been him. And to your point, we do know why he left the Warriors. That's been well documented. There's a book about it. which
From who?
there's a couple scenes in there. Ethan Strauss wrote a book about it, and there's 2 chapters in it that I'm heavily featured in terms of my dynamic with Kevin Durant. He left the Warriors because he couldn't handle not being the golden child, not being the fan favorite, not being the unquestioned number 1 guy. I think there was a part of him that really thought he was going to go to the Warriors and really be above Steph Curry on the hierarchy, which was not realistic. And his biggest goal is to go down as the greatest player of his generation and to leapfrog past LeBron, and that wasn't going to happen when you're the number 2 guy on your own team. So that was the real reason why he left. And I think he really believed that when he went to Brooklyn and brought Kyrie with him, or should I say Kyrie brought him, because I believe Kyrie picked Brooklyn. I think he really believed that they were going to go out and demolish teams and be kind of their own version of a super team. Only, he was going to be the number 1 guy, and it was going to be everything he wanted. What I think he's probably learning right now is that the situation in Golden State was incredibly unique. Will not be replicated in a lot of different ways going forward in the NBA. And you can't catch lightning in a bottle twice, especially when you're forcing it, kind of the way he is in Brooklyn. And so in fairness to him, a lot of things have not gone Brooklyn's way this season. The James Harden thing did not work out. Kyrie not playing for a lot of the season because of the backs issue and having that hang over the team all year, and then other injuries they dealt with. A lot of things went wrong, but I think he's probably seen, like, you're not going to just win because you're Kevin Durant and you're just a god, quote unquote. I hope he's been humbled. Knowing Kevin a little bit, I doubt he has been.
Agreed.
I'm sure he's going to blame this on other factors outside of his control, which there can be a case there. But I don't think he's going to take a lot of personal accountability for this.
What did Ethan? So Ethan Strauss is going to be on the show at some point soon. What did Ethan say in the book specifically that led to that conclusion?
He basically said what I just said. He basically, because Ethan was around the team a lot of those years, as was I. So he saw a lot of the same things I saw. And he saw that dynamic unfolding in terms of that last year, the 3rd year in Golden State, just the awkwardness. We now know that Kevin knew the whole time that he was leaving Golden State, and the Warriors are smart enough to have picked up on that, especially Draymond, which is why Draymond called him out in that Clippers game.
Yep.
He knew he was leaving, and everyone knew he had 1 foot out the door. And so that, I was on the beat for, I'll say 5.5 years, because I filled in on the beat for half a season this year, for 5.5 years. And that 3rd season of Kevin Durant will be the season I always remember, which is interesting because they didn't win the title that year, and I covered 2 title winning teams, but I'll always remember that year because there were just so many memorable moments, and there was so much awkwardness and just so much drama behind the scenes. It was like palpable every single day. And to me, it was just the most memorable season by far in terms of all that.
I'm sure you were involved in some of the biggest drama in NBA history. I mean, it's pretty wild. I want to hear it from Kevin Durant himself, though. And even Kevin Durant called out Ethan as being basically not verbatim saying fake news, but he did call Ethan out in a press conference saying that what you write is not true. So I need to hear it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that is absolutely the reason.
And it's because Ethan wrote what I just said, which is that Ethan wrote that his entire goal is to leapfrog past LeBron's legacy and to be the player generation, which, I agree with Ethan's reporting on that. I don't know what kind of sourcing he had on that, but I just based off, no one's ever told me that specifically, but having been around the guy, I've kind of just gleaned that. And I think that really struck a nerve with Kevin because
clearly he called out Ethan by name. I mean, it was
which is written in the book, and I've talked about on other podcasts. He called me out in the locker room toward the end of that season because of a podcast I went on, local podcast with some friends of mine,
Well, Huddle.
on the Warriors Huddle, and
Okay.
I said that I expected him to leave for Brooklyn or New York, and I expected him to follow Kyrie, and I believed like a deal was already in place, and this was just my opinion because I was
Right.
asked for my opinion, and he called me out, acting like, telling me, you act like you know my motives, you don't know me like that, blah blah blah. We now know that I was the first person to ever publicly say that, and
Congratulations, man.
that hit a nerve with him. So anytime
Bravo.
he gets upset with something, it's probably because there's truth being spoken.
Yes, of
That's one
course.
thing we've learned about Kevin Durant. So.
Of course, dude. Yeah, he wouldn't care otherwise. Look, it's all you're telling me just confirms what I think, at least I know, and what people suspect, which is that he's very egotistical. He's got a serious case of narcissism, like a serious case. Like the guy, I mean, he called himself a god yesterday, and then was defending it by saying, "What's wrong with self-affirmation?" Dude, self-affirmation does not mean comparing yourself to a deity. That's an
Dude, you're not
extreme, man.
like, yeah, you can say you're the best player of all time. You're still not a god.
Yeah, God. Again, it's wild, man. And as someone who, again, like my stepson genuinely loved Kevin Durant, and he still asks me the question today, why did KD leave? And I would like to literally have KD's own words relayed to him instead of me saying, well, son, it's because he has a huge ego. And because even though he was on a great team where he was winning and it was successful, he wanted to be the best player because he he cares more about individualism than about the team aspect of the game. It's just ridiculous. I just want Kevin Durant to just come out and say it. And I've tweeted this. I'll say this if this gets to Durant, I will never criticize you again if you just explain the why of it yourself instead of letting reporters having to find that answer from sources.
You never
It's
will.
just,
You never will.
it's insane. That's insane. But anyways, man,
He never will because the reason doesn't make him look good.
Does this, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
does he look any better right now? Like, it's just,
I
I don't know. I'm a strong believer of transparency, and just there's none of that with him. And look, man, I guess you reap what you sow, right? Because I feel like anybody who is a basketball savant could sniff out the disaster that was coming there, and he just had to learn the hard way himself. And
I
there you
tell
go. That's
Warriors fans, I'm like, just appreciate those 3 years. Like, just appreciate the fact that Kevin helped them win, 2 more titles. I don't think they would have won those 2 more. I don't think the dynasty would have carried into that next iteration without Kevin joining the team. So be appreciative of all that.
yeah,
But yeah, that was never going to be a sustainable thing. That was never, ever going to be a situation where Kevin was going to finish his career with the Warriors. I mean, look at Kevin's life. I mean, Kevin has never stayed anywhere for very
true.
long. He gets that itch. He gets restless. He gets, doesn't matter what the situation is. He can't stay anywhere for very long. It speaks to some deeper things with him as a person. Like he's just an unsettled human being. And I don't think he could ever live that life where, like us, where you're like putting down roots in a suburb and like raising your family for decades. Like he's not that dude. He never will be. Like, so.
That's fair. Did you agree with and look, Bill Simmons said recently, and look, I've had many issues with him for the way he's. I really feel he defamed Rick Barry, but that's for that's a tired thing now. But on a recent podcast, he did say one of the greatest what ifs, and I wholeheartedly agree, is what if Draymond Green is not suspended for Game 5? I mean, that was a catalyst for so many changes in the NBA and moves and actions. Do you agree with Charles Barkley saying that Kevin Durant is not a bus driver, or at least he wasn't, but the bus driver, metaphorically speaking, on those championship teams? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
Here's the thing: Kevin Durant was their best player in the finals when he was healthy, both years. He was Finals MVP. One of those years was kind of a coin flip between him and Steph, but he was the best player both years in the highest stakes games. So, it just depends on how you look at it. I mean, yes, Steph was the face of the franchise. Yes, Steph was the quote unquote system and all these things. But when push came to shove, who hit that big shot over LeBron?
True.
That was Durant.
True. There's a stat out there. I wish I had it in front of me. that showed how many times Stephen Curry was double teamed in those two NBA Final series. And I think it's like 4 versus Kevin Durant, and I think it's like 40-2. It's some astronomical number where even Ty Lue has come out and said repeatedly in those NBA Finals, his focus was Steph, and you never saw Kevin Durant getting doubled. A lot of those big shots he was hitting was wide open. So I could see Chuck's point on that. That while yes, you're right, he was the best player. He won the Finals MVPs, but so did Andre Iguodala. You know, so like how much weight are we putting on the Finals MVPs at that point?
Yeah,
and
that's literally the only accolade that Steph has not achieved in his whole career.
I know.
And that's the only thing, because he got the other one was All-Star Game MVP, and he got that this year.
You're right.
So he literally has one left, and this could be the year. I think there's a chance. It'd be interesting.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly agree, man. You can follow Connor Letourneau on Twitter at CON_CHRON, Con_Cron. Great work with the San Francisco Chronicle as always. And let's do this again soon. And let's hope next time we talk, we're talking Warriors, Grizzlies, or even better, Warriors, Timberwolves, although that team is just blowing games left and right, and they're just not ready for the big stage. Maybe next year. But dude, always a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate you.